And now rules, not obstruction rule, cost Red Sox World Series Game 3. St. Louis, for all of you who want to dumb down baseball to nothing but the American League style of play, ridding the game of its 9 vs. 9 origin by including a designated hitter in all games, understand that the unforgettable if quirky gem that was World Series Game 3 Saturday night would never have found its place in posterity without National League rules. The greatest games of this era continue to take place under the rules of the sport as it was meant to be. Game 4 of the 1996 World Series in Atlanta, Game 7 of the 2001 World Series in Arizona, Game 6 of the 2011 World Series in St. Louis, and now this beautiful tangled web of a game that was Game 3, won by the Cardinals 5-4. Only under NL rules do benches, strategy and the great pastime of second-guessing come this much into play. Get this straight, the Red Sox did not lose on a bad call by third base umpire Jim Joyce and home plate umpire Danny DeMuth. The umpires got the call right. The Red Sox lost because for a second straight game they threw a ball away from home plate to third base. You can go an entire season without seeing 2 throws by the same team airmailed from home to third that allowed the winning run to score. And yet Boston pitcher Craig Breslow and catcher Jared Saltalamacchia did exactly that in back-to-back games. Jeff, sloppy defense has been the story of the series, and the Red Sox lost Game 3 because they couldn't figure out how to play under NL rules, as is usually the case with AL teams. Since 2001 AL teams are 11-23 in NL parks. Darn National League rules, Boston manager John Farrell said from behind his desk when I asked him about it, except he used something much saltier than darn. After a long pause he did say, but that was a great game. It was baseball's version of Inception. So convoluted went the plot, with all of its games within a game, that the 2 teams combined to use 15 different players in the 9th spot in the batting order. Boston starter JPV would have still been on the mound if the game were in Boston, but in St. Louis he was out after 4 innings and 64 pitches because his spot came up in the batting order in the 5th inning with his team trailing 2-0. That's real baseball. Those same NL rules are why the Red Sox lost the game without ever using Mike Napoli, normally their starting first baseman and the usual protection for David Ortiz. Without the DH, Ortiz, Boston's best hitter, started at first and the Cardinals walked him twice, once intentionally, the other one an obvious pitch around because Napoli, his usual protection, was on the bench. Worst of all, Farrell missed a key double switch late in the game that had him kicking himself. He brought in reliever Brandon Workman to pitch the bottom of the 8th and simply put him in the 9th spot in the order. Saltalamacchia, the 7th-place hitter, had made the final out of the top of the 8th. Farrell should have put David Ross in for Saltalamacchia on defense and in the 9th spot in the batting order. It would have pushed Workman and the pitcher's spot, due up second in the next inning, 7 spots further. Instead, without the double switch, the seeds were planted for a disastrous endgame for Boston. Workman took the at-bat with 1 out in the 9th in a tight game against Trevor Rosenthal, while Napoli continued to watch. Farrell had to keep Workman in the game because his only other options were Ron Dempster and Franklin Morales not good or to force his closer, Koji Uehara, into the tight game sooner than he wanted. Workman struck out, and the non-double switch meant that Saltalamacchia remained in the game, leaving him to play a leading role in one of the most bizarre finishes in World Series history, the walk-off obstruction call. It wasn't quite John McNamara leaving Bill Buckner in at first base in Game 6 of the 1986 World Series, but karma can be a cruel jokester that way. This was the 3rd World Series walk-off loss in Red Sox history, each one with a historic amount of infamy attached. The Buckner game, the Ed Armbruster game, Game 3 of the 1975 World Series, when interference was not called on the Reds' Armbruster when he impeded catcher Carlton Fisk. on a bunt and now the walk-off obstruction game. Farrell finally had to push Uehor into the game in the ninth when Yadier Molina meet Workman for a bloop single with one out and Alan Craig coming off the bench to pinch hit. Craig placed a first-pitch double into left field. The Red Sox brought their infield in with John Jay at the plate. Jay hit a bouncer that second baseman Dustin Pedroia snared with a nifty backhand. Pedroia fired a strike to Saltalamacchia, who put the tag on Molina for the second out. Saltalamacchia then noticed Craig still hobbling toward third base. Craig, who missed almost all of September and the first 2 rounds of the postseason with a foot injury, runs like a man who forgot his walker. Saltalamacchia did have a play on Craig, but his throw sailed wide of third baseman Will Middlebrooks, who dove in vain toward the infield side of the foul line. Craig unfolded himself into a standing position and started to run. Middlebrooks was still prone on the ground from his dive. Just as Craig began to leap over Middlebrooks' legs toward home, Middlebrooks, unaware of Craig, bent his knees to lift up his feet. Craig tripped over his legs and fell, whereupon third base umpire Jim Joyce gave the mechanic your hand signal for obstruction. Now Craig hobbled home. Children on hobby horses or barflies staggering home after closing time may lend a smoother visual of locomotion than Craig did trying to run home. Imagine an 873 Pinto on the highway with one flat tire. The relay throw back to the plate, naturally, arrived before Craig did. Saltalamacchia applied the tag before Craig reached home, if he ever did.